I'm Zarina Dimitrova, a strategic partner and mentor to businesses in the process of transformation. Join me on Grow and Learn as we explore a range of topics from personal development and career advancement to relationship building and financial management. With practical advice, inspiring stories, and expert interviews, we'll give you the tools you need to thrive in every aspect of your life. Join us as we share insights and strategies that can help you achieve your personal and professional growth objectives. How to ask about what you want, whether you know how to ask, and what's behind asking. My guest today is Kenneth Berger, an executive and leadership coach for the past 7 years, and he's been in the tech startup world for 20 years. He's found his own company. He used to be a tech executive in Slack, in Adobe, I think. He's going to tell us more, maybe. I'm welcoming Kenneth. Hi, Kenneth.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great pleasure to have you. Let's start with the most fresh off the oven. You're writing a book, Ken. Well, what is the book about, and what drove you to write this book? And then I'm going to ask you about you. I want to know what's new.
Yeah, of course. So this book's really been inspired by the struggles of my clients, and of course the challenges I've faced in my own life, because I think that asking for what you want is this thing that we think we all already know how to do, right? Of course we ask for what we want, right? Like we order our coffee, we ask our employees or our peers to do things at work, and yet what I found is that we're not as good as we think, and asking for what you want is one of these core skills, right? That if you're not practicing it over and over and over again, right, it's really hard to accomplish big things.
So that's like an expanded version of delegation, asking for what you want. It kind of ripples over your family, or is it just work related?
No, it's a great question, right? I think delegation is a great example, but it's absolutely bigger than that, right? And I think some of the challenges that people come up with in delegation, right, where they say, oh, do I trust this person to do this thing, or wouldn't it be faster for me to do it myself, tend to be those are almost like exemplars of like the bigger reasons that people resist actually asking in a very direct way. Like, I'd like you to do this for me, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so before asking you to tell me how to ask, what's behind that? Have you dug into the psychological reasons or any other reasons that may be causing people to not to ask?
Yeah, no, and I think it's a knowing question, right? Because the actual mechanics, of course, are not that complicated. And what I find working with clients is that the real challenge is working through our own internal resistance, right? The parts of us that don't want to ask for what we want, right? And so I think of these archetypes of the people pleaser and the control freak, right? It's like we know these archetypes, we are them, we know these people in our lives, and I think what I find is the folks who sort of align more with the people pleaser strategy, they're scared to really share what they want in a strong, direct, open way, right? Because their way of feeling safe in the world is making sure that people like them, and so they don't really want to rock the boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, for the control freak, their strategy for feeling safe in the world is, yeah, I'm in control of my environment. I generally, sort of can control to get what I want. And sort of the strategy they often use to move towards that is kind of being very, very forceful with, all right, do this, I want this, let's make this happen, which I think you could think is effective asking, and I think it's part of effective asking is saying it out loud. But a really important additional part is listening to the response. And I think often what those folks are getting is they're getting variations of no, and they kind of just don't hear it, right? When people say, yeah, I'm not sure about that, like, or I'll try, right? These are not yeses, these are nos. These are the ways people, end up saying no in practice. And so what I work on with sort of more control freak types is really listening to the response, because you're not going to learn how to actually get what you want unless you're iterating and listening to what the response you get back is.
When you're talking about these archetypes, I'm also aware of them, but they have a bit of they describe the same thing, but they have a different name. And so in order to work towards the empowered archetype, what kind of tools do you normally use? Are they specific tools that you apply for, or do you tailor each coaching case?
Yeah, so part of what I love about one-on-one coaching is it is very individual, right? That I think we all are a little different and sort of are in different places in our careers and our goals and the sort of frameworks and ideas we resonate with. So it's definitely not one size fits all. But then at the same time, like we are all the same in certain ways. Like just as you say, both the people pleaser and the control freak, like they're just trying to feel okay day to day, right? And making everyone happy or controlling and sort of getting, exactly what you want are both just common strategies that people adopt to feel okay. And so I think part of, of course, there's lots of pieces to it, but I think to me, the most important piece to unwinding some of these strategies that, work in the short term, but don't work in the long term, to get what you want or to sort of, find peace and calm, is just paying attention, right? Of just being mindful of these strategies so that instead of saying, oh, like I shouldn't do this or I have to do this, to say, oh, I'm doing that people pleasing thing again. And I know that's my impulse, that's my natural place to go, but I'm practicing trying something else and seeing what results that gives me.
Mm-hmm. And do you normally find it enough for people to get the insight, to get the knowing of and the awareness of what they're doing, or do they usually need to do some deeper psychological work to overcome these barriers?
Well, I think that the in a way, just noticing what you're doing is kind of deep psychological work. Because to give an example, right? I think sometimes, I might say, hey, it seems like in this situation you're worried about pleasing people or about, making sure that everyone's happy. And people would say, oh no, I'm not scared about that, right? I'm just being strategic, right? That I need to build relationships and making sure that all my stakeholders are pleased is actually just practical way I run about my business. And so there's lots of ways we can build up explanations for why these strategies are really effective. And that's what's tricky is it's not that they don't work, it's that they work in the short term or they work at a cost, right? Because sure, you can get things done being a people pleaser, but you don't get to really express the core of who you are and what you want because you always have to hide a little bit, right? And say, oh, I'm going to present the version of myself that's acceptable or, not too controversial or whatever it is. And I think that starts to eat away at you at time, right? And people don't even always realize how much they're playing an act, right? And the feeling of getting to be their real selves, at work or at home or both can be really, really transformational.
Mm-hmm. Well, from my observation and also the line of work that I'm doing, which is partially related to reprogramming past experiences, and that's why I asked you: is the insight enough, or do they need to go to do deep psychological work? And I do agree that insight alone and being aware, staying aware, is deep psychological work. What I meant is actually, do they need to maybe go through some sort of deep therapy like regression and access their subconscious mind and stuff like that? But you answered the question. So
Oh, I mean, certainly sometimes, right? I mean, it's you can't generalize over everyone. So yeah, sometimes, if we're not making progress, I'll certainly refer clients away to therapy if it feels like that's going to be a more useful methodology for them. Um, but and I love coaching, I love therapy. I have a therapist and a coach myself. Um, but I think for me, it really just depends on the person and sort of what their particular challenges are, sort of what the edge is for them. Um, and so yeah, I think it's hard to generalize, really, I guess what I'd say.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what kind of stuff are people supposed to ask for? I understand it's a very individual thing, but there must be some generalizable groups of the kinds of stuff startup founders may be unwilling to ask for.
Yeah, so I think that you know, part of what's actually, I think, an underappreciated piece of asking is being really particular about actually articulating what you want. Because sometimes I think people might say something like, um, oh, like, so-and-so screwing up this project. Like they really need, to do X and Y, right? Like, and so at a certain level, like what they want might be, all right, I want this person to change their behavior, right? But often we'll dig into that because it's like, okay, like we can't really directly control other people's behavior, right? Like that's so we'll get into like, okay, well, what are we hoping to get? Like if we control other people's behavior, right? Why do we want this other person to do this thing so badly?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sort of often there's a deeper goal there of like, well, I just want, you know, I just want to run this team in an efficient way, right? And I have the sense that this other person's strategy is inefficient and mine is efficient. And it's like, okay, great. Like probably they want efficiency too. So maybe more what we want is like a understanding of what we of what both of us are working towards. Because I think often there's a sense that I'm working towards the right thing and this person is working towards the wrong thing. And of course, everyone has some positive intent in sort of what they're working towards. And so I think that when we go a little bit deeper about what we actually want and go for the big version of that, which might just be, I want to have a great relationship with my peers and I want to have a really efficient team that gets, amazing, inspiring things done. Right. And I think a lot of people go short of that, right? They kind of do a smaller thing of saying, oh, I just want so-and-so to do what I ask them to do. And so when we actually articulate a bigger goal, like I think can be really helpful to help us get creative about how we might actually accomplish it, as opposed to being really narrow of, oh, I'm going to accomplish it in this specific way.
Mm-hmm. So your book, is it mostly about framing the asking, or is it also about asking yourself certain questions? Because this is where you touched upon right now. What do you really want? So I assume it's also about asking yourself important questions.
Um, I think certainly, the well, let me put it this way, right? So when I say ask for what we want, it really is about like asking outwards in the world, right? It's about influencing other people. So that's the way I mean it when I say ask for what you want. But I think you're right that there is the operational piece of like what do you actually do, right? And I break that down into 3 steps, right? That you articulate what you want, like the way we just described, of like what is the biggest version of what I actually want in the world. You have to say it out loud. So the actual asking, like who am I going to ask? And what exactly am I going to ask for? And then there's the acceptance, right? Which is the part that control freaks tend to skip, which is accepting the response. Am I really getting a yes, or am I getting something short of a yes? Like a maybe, or let me see about that. And really absorbing, what to do with that response. Because of course, asking is usually an iterative process because mostly people tell us no, in one way or the other. And so to me, the asking yourself part is looking at why do I resist doing that? Because that's a pretty simple process, right? Articulate what you want, say it out loud, and accept the response. And so these asking yourself questions is about understanding, yeah, why am I resisting doing this? Why do I find this so hard or so uncomfortable? And as I'm sure you know, like that's a complicated process, like figuring that out so that finding that place where you can really be strong and do the brave thing.
So when it comes to acceptance and they get the no, what is the learning then? What are the coping strategies? How do they overcome the no and ask again? How does this become a part of their startup culture?
Yes. So this is the part I love because I think to me a lot of the fear that people associate with asking for what they want is this idea that something horrible is going to happen if they get a no, right? That that people are not going to like them in the people pleaser case, or in the control freaks case, that like, oh, like what the right thing that I want is not going to happen, and that's a serious, very bad problem. And so I like to really turn that on its head and say, like, getting no is the normal response, right? Like, if we just ask any random person in the world, like, people tend not to just say, oh, yes, absolutely, I'll do exactly what you want, right? Mostly we get some degree of no. And so I really like to normalize with that with clients so that we can start to think about no, not as a failure or as a problem, but as, yeah, that's just the default case for the world. It's hard to influence other people. And so when we normalize the no and make that actually just part of the learning and the iteration, I think especially tech and startup people really get that because they're like, oh, I know about iterative development. Of course, like we need to test and learn and go back and go back and go back. But they don't think about applying that to these kind of individual interpersonal interactions because they feel higher stakes in a strange way than the bigger things they work on.
And your book is currently in development. What else are you looking for? What is the missing piece at the moment, something that you're working on?
I think for me, it's all about kind of what framings resonate, because this is a framework I've been using with clients for years. And so we have the opportunity to return to it week by week by week and see like which is the piece that we want to focus on, right? Maybe today we're having trouble articulating what it is, right? Maybe another day we're sort of feeling really afraid and going back to our old coping strategies. And so we're working through some of that fear. Or maybe we're accepting the response, right? We're really trying to listen well. And so there's a way in which we can zoom in on each part of the process and sort of learn that. And so for the book, I'm trying to really bring it all into focus. And I think the challenge for me is, figuring out how to help that land for people, not just in an intellectual way, but in an emotional way. Because my complaint about business books in general is that they're boring, right? They have no emotional stakes. It's like, oh, okay, here's a process you use to get stuff done. Who cares?
Yeah,
Right.
that's why it's hard to read them.
Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
relatability. Yeah, I understand that. So where does Kenneth, not the author, but the coach, want to take it next? Well, what is your goal? What is your tell us a bit about you. I skipped this part, but now I want to know. Now that we know about the book, tell us about you.
Well, gosh, where to start? I think that maybe it's useful to talk about how I got into coaching, right? Because
Yeah.
I think that some coaches, they get into coaching because they say, oh, I'm a CEO who exited multiple times and I have all the answers, right? So if you want an advisor to tell you, exactly how to run your company, I'm the one who's been there, done that. Um, and I'm not that kind of coach, right? I had a pretty successful tech career. I worked at some great companies, did some things I'm really proud of. But the things that inspired me to be a coach were all my failures, right? Not my successes. It was, relationships breaking down, right? When, I broke up with my co-founder at the startup that I founded, when I got fired from Slack, this iconic company, by the CEO, and this product that I love, this team that I love. And so coming out of those experiences was really a great, um, sort of moment for me to reflect on not blaming everyone else, but really looking at myself and saying, how did I create these situations that I'm not really enjoying, that I didn't want? Um, and so when I thought about what impact I wanted to make in the next part of my career, I said, okay, I'm a pretty good operator, sort of tech product manager guy. But there's a lot of people who are good at that. There are a lot of people who want those jobs. And I felt that there were not as many people who were taking care of these sort of internal emotional lives of these people who are doing really hard, challenging work. And I love the startup world and I love sort of supporting this community in a way where, yes, we can talk about what's the latest, greatest technology, and we can talk about their internal lives, right? Because I think that's the part that really tugs at my heartstrings, is knowing I don't know if a startup that, an individual client is going to work on is going to succeed or fail, right? Most of them fail, right? That's how the numbers go. But I know that the work that each of my clients do on themselves to grow and to sort of be more capable in their lives, that's going to last for any number of jobs beyond there. And that means a lot to me. I love that.
Mm-hmm. At the time of your failures, if you had known what you know now, and especially this framework for asking, do you think that things would have looked differently for you?
Of course, yes. With the benefit of hindsight, so much would be different. Yeah, I mean, where to start? How long do we have? But yeah, I mean, I think, a few lessons that stand out to me from those times are um letting go of being right, right? I think I'm a little bit more on the control freak side. And so I think I had sort of the strength of the confidence that I was right and things should be my way, right? Which I think can be a real strength, right? In a lot of leadership roles of thinking, yeah, like I've got this, like this is the way we should do it. And it can be a real weakness interpersonally, right? Because if you enter into a conversation saying, I'm right and you're wrong, I mean, that's a fundamentally disrespectful way of communicating with another person.
Mhm.
So these days, I come into a conversation, even with something like this, right? Of like, this book that I'm passionate about. If you came in and said, Kenneth, I think this is wrong. I don't think this is how you ask for what you want. You should do it a totally different way, right? Like, I wouldn't be coming in arguing with you. I'd say, wow, like, thank you for sharing that with me, right? I'm interested in this and like, I want to hear what you have to say, even if I end up disagreeing with it, right? And, it's, practicing that for many years now has really it's made a huge difference in my relationships, right? Because you get to sort of reach across the aisle and talk to people who disagree with you in a respectful way and still build a strong relationship.
Mhm. Well, when it comes to founders, let's say, of startups, and especially tech startups, they're so pumped up about their success. I mean, they're what you just described you were when you were um, yourself engaged as a startup founder and a co-founder. Do you find that it's difficult to convince them that they might need to change their ways, or do you sometimes find, I mean, I'm not trying to give you suggestions here, but I'm just thinking out loud, because the people that I generally see going in this realm, they're very determined and don't really want to go so much into self-reflection, because it's about meekness. It's not about being strong, getting ahead, determined, but it like they perceive self-reflection as a sign of being weak. Have you noticed something like that or not?
Definitely with some people, so you'd be surprised. I mean, some people are very ready to sort of go into a more emotional conversation, and it's almost like they've been waiting for it because they know they haven't been getting it at work. But you're right that other people are very resistant to that, and they say, that, I don't want to show any sign of weakness or vulnerability. And so with those folks, like I don't try to convince them, right? Because it's that's part of my philosophy is I think of myself as an empirical coach, right? That it's not that you come in and you have to read my book and believe in everything that I believe in. We say, no, we're going to empirically prove what's going to work for you. And so if I say, okay, right, like you want to be Mr. Tough Guy, let's go try that and see how that works, like in your next couple of challenging meetings. And then we actually get to come back and look at it with a little bit more of a clear eye and say, okay, how did that work? And usually they say, yeah, it didn't work that well, right? It didn't get me the results that I wanted. And so rather than trying to convince them that, oh, I have the perfect right way, I say, well, let's try something, right? Because we know that this isn't working. So let's just try something different. We don't have to try it forever. We'll just try it for tomorrow or for next week.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way, I don't have to prove anything to them. They get to prove it to themselves, right? To say, oh, yeah, I tried being a little bit more vulnerable with this person and, it actually totally changed things. And we were able to have a different type of conversation. I say, okay, there's a data point, right? Like, let's figure out what to try next.
Yeah. And when you do these trial and errors, how long does it normally take for somebody to turn their approach around?
Think it really depends on the person. I think that I usually meet with clients, every week or every other week, and so that's kind of the speed of our iteration, right? And so I think for some people they'll try a new strategy, it'll immediately work, and they're sort of sold, and we're on a path towards change. And for other people, they're really resistant, and I totally respect that because I am very resistant too. Um, and so it might take them weeks and weeks and weeks to get to the change they want to make because maybe it's really hard change, right? It depends on the client. I definitely have worked with founders where they end up realizing, yeah, I don't like the culture of my company and I'm going to end up like letting go half of my team, right? Or really changing the culture and saying, if you don't like this, you're welcome to quit. And so those types of revolutionary changes, they are scary. And so it does take more time to work up to those. And I really, I go at the client's pace, right? Because it's not for me to say what pace they're supposed to go at. I say, yeah, I want to help you move towards your goals, and it's up to you when and if you do.
Hmm. I really enjoyed this conversation, Ken. Anything else that I've missed asking you?
Um, no, I don't think so. But
Where can people reach you if they want to give input for your book or get a consultation with you?
Yeah, please check out kberger.com. So it's Kberger. You can hear all about me and my coaching practice and some links to some of my writing. And yeah, if you're interested in chatting, please reach out through there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all the tips and insights that you shared.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, visit my website at grownlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.